2024 brought me some unexpected gems. Here are the most surprising and the best movies and TV shows I watched in 2024. This is part 2. In part 1, I shared my most disappointing and worst TV shows and movies. So if you missed it, watch it right after this one. Let's start with the most surprising category. Number 1, That Christmas. It's an animated Christmas fantasy. It was released just a few weeks ago, and it was such a pleasant surprise for me, perhaps because I no longer trust Netflix. And I wasn't expecting much from its Christmas releases, but it was so good that I even included it in my Christmas recommendations. So if you want to know more about it, you can check out that video, but just know that it's worth watching. Number 2, Arcane. This is an adult animated steampunk action-adventure TV show, and season 2 was released in 2024, but actually I watched both seasons this year because I was late to the game, basically. I had no clue what Arcane was, and even though I played League of Legends a couple of times with my brother, I had no clue about the whole lore behind it, and maybe that's why it was a bit hard for me to follow, but watching a couple of deep dives on YouTube was enough for me to fully enjoy the story. Honestly, I'm happy to see that animation is getting to the next level. I mean, think about the Spider-Verse. This reminds me a little bit of that because it merges several types of animation, and it doesn't matter how many or how different styles they blend because they simply work together. I don't know, it's truly like magic because they balance so well the music and the tone of the show with all these different styles of animation. I was genuinely surprised, and as I mentioned, the music, it's not even my favorite genre, not at all. And yet it was perfect, the use of music in this show. It made each scene even more compelling and soul-crushing when needed. It's a dark show with dark themes, but it's absolutely unique and a must-watch for all those who are into animation, but not only. Number 3, Caddo Lake. This is a thriller, and it's the movie I was hoping to see when I watched Things Will Be Different. I made a whole video about it if you want to know what I'm talking about. And this is a hidden gem because I hardly heard anybody talk about Caddo Lake. It really went unnoticed, I believe. And yes, it's a bit of a slow pace beginning especially. It picks up a little bit after the midpoint, maybe. But in the end, everything adds up. It all makes sense, and this is something not as common as it should be in movies, which is why I really praise Caddo Lake. Let me know if you ever heard anybody talk about Caddo Lake, and if you have watched it yourself, what are your opinions? Number 4, Raising Dion. This is a superhero drama, and if I had to describe it with one word, it might be unassuming, because it doesn't promise anything that it won't deliver, which is why I was surprised by how good the story was in the end. I had zero expectations. I just put this on looking for something simple and not scary because it was right after my series of scary movies that I watched, and I'm not a horror type of person. And I mean, the plot flows between the daily life of this child and the realization that there are some unexpected powers that are slowly revealed, and an intriguing mystery in the end. So it was way better than I was expecting because, well, I went into it without expecting much. And on a similar note, number 5, Supacell. Again, a superhero TV show that was surprising because it was well crafted. Even though at least half of the story was predictable, I thought it would be bad. And so the simple fact that it wasn't bad and actually was enjoyable and that the characters were believable made it one of the most surprising things that I watched this year. And given the state of things, I have no clue whether they will renew it for a second season. The story calls for it, but who knows. Number 6, Kaos. This is a mythological dark comedy, and cancelling Kaos was one of the worst decisions Netflix made in 2024. And I'm not the only one who thinks so, because Greek mythology doesn't usually appeal to me that much, especially if I have a choice. But when I saw Jeff Goldblum on the poster of the series, I knew this was worth my time. And I was absolutely right. And it's a crime it was cancelled, because it's finally a fresh, quirky, weird story that is a constant surprise in each episode. And despite being cancelled, it's still worth watching. So I would still recommend it to you. And the last one in this category, number 7, is Agatha All Along. This is a fantasy miniseries, and my expectations were low. But honestly, it felt as if Marvel was back, was finally back. I might be a little bit biased because I love witches, but I haven't enjoyed any recent Marvel movies, so I wasn't really hoping for much. And yet, this is intriguing, compelling, well crafted. The story makes sense on its own, in a way. Despite, again, being a Marvel, you have plenty of Easter eggs and details that you might miss if you're not familiar with the rest of the MCU. And yet, you can still enjoy it on its own, which is awesome, honestly. And I watched an awesome review by Whichway, I will link it below, and she makes a detailed analysis that I wouldn't be able to make because I'm not experienced in witchcraft or witch-related media. I'm just passionate about it and I watch it happily, but I wouldn't be able to do that kind of analysis, so I highly recommend her channel. And now on to the best movies and TV shows I watched in 2024. Number 1, Shōgun. This is a historical drama set in Japan in the 1600s. This was stunning, and it's also the best portrayal of an interpreter's job. And if you don't know, I'm a linguist, so I'm fascinated by this, because it really shows the nuances, the responsibility, the skill, the pressure, the knowledge that are required in this job. All the characters are believable, and you get the chance to know them one by one, and also to understand their reasons. Because there are certain choices that are made in this show that, no matter how extreme, are still in line with the depiction of the characters. And this allows the viewers to trust the storytelling and to get lost in a world that is not often shown on mainstream media. I may be a little biased because I adore Japan and everything related to Japan, but Shōgun is a masterpiece, hands down. And just be careful if you're sensitive to gruesome scenes, because there's quite a lot, and that's the only thing that I would say could stop someone from watching Shōgun. Number 2, Three Body Problem. This is a sci-fi TV show. I had heard about the books it's based on, even though I never read them. I watched several reviews, and I just knew that it was popular, but I had no clue that a show about it was coming. And I was so happy about it, well, because I managed to avoid all spoilers somehow, and I fully enjoyed each episode. I loved the mystery, the technology, the science that was really diluted, because I heard that the books are heavy on the science, and that's why some people are not able to enjoy them fully. But the TV show was clearly simplified and was so good. I cannot wait for the second season. Number 3, Dark Matter, another sci-fi that is quite similar to the previous one, as it's based on a popular sci-fi book. Again, I heard a lot about it, but I believe the TV show is so underrated and so fascinating. I watched it right after I made my underrated, mind-bending sci-fi TV shows, so I couldn't include it in there, but it would have been perfect. The only thing that I noticed that I wasn't happy about is that there were a few slow scenes in which I really thought, okay, we got it, move on, or some kind of repetition, maybe even in the dialogue. And again, I got the idea, I know what you're talking about, let's move on. But it was just a couple of times and it still wasn't enough to ruin the experience. Honestly, if you haven't watched Dark Matter, go ahead now because it's awesome. Number 4, The Imaginary. This came out in 2023, but I watched it in 2024 and it really brought me back to the glorious Studio Ghibli era, yet with a contemporary twist. I talked about the studio that made The Imaginary when I mentioned Mary and the Witch's Flower, and I really hope you'll watch it because it's so worth it. And finally, number 5, See. This again, I was late to the game because it came out between 2019 and 2022, and it's a sci-fi drama that has such a fascinating concept that I was shocked. I never heard of it before. I even watched a review by a blind man who praised this show, and this made me enjoy the show even more and appreciate the effort that they made because they created a credible setting, considering that in this world, seeing is not an option. Everybody is born blind. And so they had to use strategies to navigate this world, but also to make this show possible. I was truly impressed. And again, as a linguist, I'm fascinated by communication in general, and the show, See, is unique, to say the least. However, there is a lot of violence and gruesome scenes, and I had to skip a series of scenes because they were too graphic for me. But other than that, this show was brilliant. And there you have my most surprising and my best movies and TV shows of 2024, or that I watched in 2024. Which are yours? Please let me know in the comments down below. Don't forget to check out part 1 if you missed it, and hit the notification bell so you won't miss my upcoming videos. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.